tonight I'm making sweet potato soup, and between my phone getting fixed and our internet's fixed, we have like a wireless router network now. I think that bodes well for hopefully us not having any technical difficulties this week, and I'm hoping that the stream will run smoothly the whole time and then upload without any problems. So, hey Marie, how are you? So first of all, okay, so I have all my ingredients kind of laid out here, and I don't know if any of y'all have heard that term, but it's called mise en place. So basically, it's a French term, but I interpret it to be like all ingredients kind of like prepped and in their place, everything in its place. And when everything's in its place before you start cooking, it makes it that much easier when you actually start cooking. You're not hunting for things or trying to prep things. You just have everything ready to go, and it's a lot less stressful. So I kind of recommend that. Just gathering everything together. And if you need to, kind of prep something ahead of time, then that helps a lot. So over here in my 8-quart stock pot, I have 3 tablespoons of olive oil butter substitute. So this will be dairy free in case James wants to have some, but you could also use butter in place of that. And I also have 3 tablespoons of olive oil. And I'm going to turn this on to medium. Hi Lisa, how are you? Okay. All right. All right, so I'm going to turn that on to medium and grab a wooden spoon here and just melt that over the stove. Lisa, if you'd like to pop over and try a little bit of soup after this is done, you're welcome to it. I think we're going to have some leftovers. All right, so the olive oil butter substitute and the regular olive oil is all melted. And I'm going to pour in one chopped shallot and 3 cloves or 3 toes of minced garlic. And so remember, that's different than a head of garlic, which is the whole thing. The clove is just one little part of that. So I have 3 of those and 1 of the shallot. And sorry y'all, I had to tilt the camera a little bit when I'm pouring this into the pan. All right. Okay. So I think y'all can see again. So all of that's in the pan. I think there's just a little piece of sweet potato, but that won't matter. Okay, and we are going to stir this for about 3 or 4 minutes until everything gets soft and fragrant. All right, so I'm going to let that go for a minute and then stir it a little bit more. Okay, so just to show y'all, this is what a shallot looks like. The first time I saw a shallot in a recipe, I wasn't completely sure what I was looking at in the store, and I looked all over Publix, and I think I ended up getting some kind of small onion, and it was not a shallot. But this is a shallot. It's kind of purplish, as you can see. It kind of looks like a big head of garlic as far as the shape, but it's kind of purplish, and when you open it up, it's in concentric rings like an onion. So it's an onion family, a little bit milder. I think it's a little bit sweeter. And then, of course, this is a head of garlic. So those are just white. This is a whole head or a bulb. And then for the recipe, I just used 3 of the individual cloves of garlic, and I minced those up. All right, so this is smelling nice and fragrant over here. Just stirring it so it doesn't burn, because we definitely don't want burnt garlic. Burnt garlic tastes kind of bitter. That's why we don't want it to burn. But letting it cook in the oil and the olive oil butter substitute, or if you want to use real butter if you don't have allergies in your house, letting it cook and get nice and soft releases those oils and makes it really fragrant, and it's going to add a lot of flavor. And we're going to end up blending this in the end, and so if you're kind of like me and you really don't like onion, even if it's in shallot form, I don't really like the texture, or if you're not a huge fan of garlic, this is all going to blend in the end, so you won't like bite into a chunk of it or anything. Okay, well that is smelling pretty good, so I am going to go ahead and add some of our liquid so that we don't risk burning either the shallot or the garlic. Okay, so I have 4 cups of unsalted chicken broth here that I'm going to pour in. I would actually rather use reduced sodium chicken broth. I just happen to have unsalted chicken broth on hand because one day when I was catering, I bought Publix completely out of their unsalted of their reduced sodium chicken broth, and so I had to pick up a couple of unsalted, and so I had one of those left on hand. And I actually need 6 cups rather than 4, and since I didn't realize I didn't have quite enough on hand, I'm going to add 2 cups of white wine to make 6 cups of liquid, because the white wine is going to add a little bit more depth of flavor than just adding plain water would. And I might end up adding a little bit more sea salt at the end, because just as I taste it and season to flavor, since I didn't use since I didn't use the reduced sodium chicken broth, there's no salt in that whatever, so I might end up adding just a little bit more to bring that to where it's seasoned appropriately. Okay, and actually with before I melted the olive oil in the olive oil butter substitute, I had added about a teaspoon of ground sea salt to that as well. So there was a little bit of salt in here already, just about a teaspoon. All right. Okay, and we're going to turn this up from medium heat to high heat. Hi, Angela. How are you doing? I hope your family had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Okay, so we're going to bring that up to high, and I'm also going to add about 2 pounds of sweet potatoes. They're just kind of cut up and cubed into about, 1/2 inch to inch pieces there. And I peeled and washed those before I cut them up into small pieces. And 2 pounds of sweet potatoes is roughly 2 to 3 sweet potatoes. And I know sweet potatoes can vary in size. Some of them are just humongous. And then sometimes you get normal sized sweet potatoes to where they, would be reasonable for a serving just as a baked sweet potato. So I kind of weighed those before I left the store, and I ended up with just a little bit over 2 pounds. I had two bigger sweet potatoes and 1 small one to make the 2 pounds. Okay, I'm just going to add this in here. I don't want this to splash up and hit y'all, not really in the face, but hit it in the camera so where it gets kind of blurry, so I'm being careful putting these sweet potatoes in. I had a handful of julienne sweet potatoes in the fridge that were raw earlier today, and so I decided to use those up and go ahead and cook them, and actually fried them. So there's a little bit of vegetable oil in the pan still there, but I just fried those over the stove for a few minutes until they just got kind of browned and started to get a little bit crispy, and then put a little sea salt on those. They were delicious, so much better than getting frozen sweet potatoes from the grocery store. So we just had a handful of those and kind of munched on that as James' afternoon snack, and it was kind of a little appetizer before dinner for us. So my husband really enjoyed those. Hey Autumn, how are you doing? We're making sweet potato soup tonight. All right, so we are going to bring that up to boil, so that's still needing to come up to temperature. And then, like I said, mise en place, I already have everything kind of portioned out, so it's easier. This is about a teaspoon of sea salt, and then about 1/2 teaspoon of freshly ground pepper. And I'm going to pour this in. And then if I think the soup needs a little bit more salt or pepper at the end, then I can add that at the end after I've tasted it to kind of see how we're doing. Okay, Once I get that up to a boil, I'm going to turn it down to low and simmer it for about 20 to 25 minutes. After that, I'm going to blend it up really well with an immersion blender, and so that'll puree all of the soft sweet potato chunks, and it'll also puree up that minced garlic and the chopped shallot that I had in there as well. So if you don't like huge chunks of garlic or any kind of oniony thing like me, then that's all going to be blended into the soup. It's going to add some nice flavor to it, but it'll all be blended in so you can't even really tell it's there. And after blending that, I'm also going to whisk in about 3 tablespoons of maple syrup, and I'm also going to add about a teaspoon or 2 of rosemary and blend that together. So the rosemary will add like a nice flavor kick to it, give it some herbs, and add a little bit more depth and flavor. And then instead of adding about half a cup of mascarpone cheese to the recipe, I'm going to leave that out so that this whole recipe will be dairy free, and that'll give James the option to eat some. So these days it kind of fluctuates what he feels like eating, but that way he'll be able to try it. And instead of that, when I serve it, we can just put a teaspoon or 2 of mascarpone cheese on the top of our warm soup and stir that in until it'll be creamy and melt into our soup to give us some rich, creamy flavor, and add a little, it'll add some richness to that. And we can do the same when we heat up the soup when we're having leftovers. It's just add the mascarpone cheese to each individual serving. But if your family's not dairy-free like ours, then you could just add about half a cup of the mascarpone cheese at the end and whisk it in with the maple syrup and the rosemary. Okay, so I'm just going to let that come up to a boil. Like I said, I think we're almost there, so that'll just be maybe a few more minutes, and then I'll bring that down to low and then wait 20 to 25 minutes before blending that and mixing in the final ingredients. So today's been a busy day of cooking. I also, and I started this yesterday. It took quite a while because I had to wait for the bread to rise and then deflate it and let it rise again, and then separate it into a couple loaves and let it rest, and then shape it into loaves and then let it rise again, and then perforate the top and then bake it. So this started last night and ended up baking it this morning after it rose all night. But this is just some French bread. So real simple. There's all-purpose flour. There's yeast and salt and water in this, and that's basically it. So James loved it, and the fresh bread smelled really good. So we had some for lunch. I made sandwiches out of it, and it was delicious. I also made James some dairy-free sugar cookies. These are actually a little bit more like shortbread cookies. They really don't have a ton of sugar in them. And he got to have one of those for his snack after his nap today. So after our bad experience with peanut butter cookies last weekend, apparently he can't have egg if there's not flour in the cookie. So he's done pretty well if I've made like a banana bread or cake or cookies that have egg in it, as long as they're dairy free. Although he still can't have scrambled eggs. He can't have eggs like if it's in a turkey burger, or he can't have raw eggs like in cookie dough. But apparently he can't even have egg if it's in a peanut butter cookie with peanut butter and sugar. So that was not a good experience. We had some rash and some projectile vomiting last weekend that we're not keen to experience again. So back to what we know is safe. These just good old sugar cookies with tons of flour in them, but he loves them, and I was able to make Christmas shapes today, which is pretty festive. I also have a pot roast in the oven here, and I'll let y'all take a peek at it. It's almost done. It'll probably be done around 7 o'clock. So let's take a peek at our pot roast. So I browned it in olive oil on both sides after I seasoned it with salt and pepper. Ooh, that is smelling really good. Oh, that smells so good. I'm excited. But I seasoned it on both sides with salt and pepper, and then I browned it on both sides in olive oil, and then I poured in about half and half mixture of beef broth and red wine. We had some Pinot Noir on hand, so that was about 50-50, and then I just filled it to where it was halfway covering the meat, and then I sprinkled some Italian seasoning on it that had rosemary and thyme and marjoram and oregano, and I think some savory and sage, and it is smelling really good. So after browning that on both sides, I stuck it in the oven at 225 for 2 hours, and this was a 2-pound roast, so about 2 hours is right for this. It's I would say by 7 o'clock in that central time, it would be going about 2 hours and 15 minutes. So just cooking that low and slow is going to make it really tender and fall apart. So that's going to be really yummy. So we're going to have that and our sweet potato soup and our fresh bread, and also going to roast some asparagus to go with that. So we'll have a green veggie to go with it in addition to the sweet potato soup. So that's kind of our meal for tonight. I hope y'all enjoyed learning how I'm making the sweet potato soup. I'm really excited to try it. I love soup in the fall and the winter. It's just so comforting, and I just really enjoyed the butternut squash soup that I made about a month ago. It was delicious, and we heartily enjoyed that. So I'm excited to try something very similar but a little bit different with the sweet potatoes. So I'll take pictures of that as it turns out after I blend it together, and then add the other ingredients so you can kind of see how it turns out. If you have any questions or miss something, then just message me and I'll be happy to help you out. So bon appetit. Enjoy the rest of this night and time with your family before the week gets busy starting tomorrow. Y'all take care. Have a great evening.